Do you ever feel stuck? Are you finding yourself wondering, how am I ever going to start this business? Or how will I figure out my side hustle? Do you sometimes feel like a total fake or even an imposter? Do you feel like you're faking it until you hopefully one day finally make it in your business goals and dreams? If this is you, we totally get it, and you're in the right place. Jessie, Lauren, and Mel are three besties who come together weekly to discuss our businesses and things we're learning along the way. One day, we realized that we all felt like imposters, but none of us thought the other was. We all just needed a little extra help that we give freely so that we can all achieve our goals. We share real life learnings in real time to get you from where you are to where you want to be. Expect positive vibes, great conversations, strong female friendship, women supporting women, and a business education that you didn't learn in school. Jessie is your girl for real estate and design. She turns boring into beautiful. Lauren is your go-to for product creation. She makes products that make your life easier. Mel is a mindset coach, and she helps women live their dream lives. Together, we are Imposter Women, and we're here to help you chase your dreams unapologetically. Hello and welcome to Imposter Women Episode 2, the show that helps you tackle your life and business goals unapologetically and with confidence. I'm your host, Jessie Linder-Gallo, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Melissa Hassong and Lauren Troxtel, and we are literally together today, which we don't normally get to do. Celebrate a little bit. In today's episode, we're really excited to be talking to you about how to decide what business to start. That's something that we've all struggled with in the past and had to figure out, even been through ourselves. So this is a topic we're really excited to explore with all of you. Before we get into all of that, though, we all want to give some updates on our businesses. I'm so excited to hear where you ladies are at and to show everybody else where we're at in our journey. Lauren, you've got lots brewing on your end.
Yeah.
Tell us about.
So, I would say right now the big things that have been going on was about a week ago, I kind of started shifting from candle making and doing fitness stuff to I have a big move coming up. And I started thinking about how there's all sorts of resources that I know about with moving and how I'd love to share that with people while I'm going through this whole moving process. Kind of shifted over a little bit. The other stuff is not the right time with trying to move and purchasing more equipment to then move again. So that's where I'm at there. I bought a website, so that was a big one. And then this week, we just found out that we firmed an apartment and they allow third-party rentals. So we're looking at Airbnb options, which is now a whole new ball game, but that's something that I've been really interested in. I'm excited to start diving into that venture.
Honestly, that's a great segue. So we're like both playing a little real estate right now.
Right.
It's a like beautiful industry. So I know in my business this week, we've had some big strides forward. So a week ago, I said, we're going to list a week from now. It's going to be great. So we listed. We went live Monday night and we were under contract Wednesday night. It is sold. So if you're watching this, it was a really cute property. It was such an interesting journey and like confidence. It's such a different thing to like create something and then like put it out for the world to say, okay, now decide what it's worth and if like put a value on it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a nerve-wracking experience, but it was a really big confidence boost, both for my husband and I, to put something on the market and realize that the competition was not at the same level. Like that was awesome to look. We're looking at the comps and nothing was updated and nothing had the hits and the saves. Like we were watching all of our Zillow statistics and we were doubling or tripling or more some of our comps on views within the first 24 hours and saves. Like really cool to watch that process. And I tend to be like, okay, worst case scenario, like let's just be comfortable with that. And so I had in my head like, it'll probably be a week until showing comes through. Like I don't want to have too high of expectations.
Absolutely not. We had showings booked before it hit Zillow.
Wow.
So
That's great.
it was awesome. So I think we ended up with like 10 showings in total. 3 of them we had to cancel because we had already accepted an offer. So it was a great exercise in like, oh, wow, hold on, we could do this.
Yeah.
That was our update this week.
And do it well too.
Absolutely.
Not just half-heartedly, but actually doing something new and doing it well. And you have that data to show that comparative properties are nowhere near where you are. It must feel really reaffirming that you're on the right path and that you're doing the right things and you know your stuff and you're able to create such beauty that someone appreciates is the other thing.
Yeah, definitely. And that price piece is such a different, I know so many entrepreneurs struggle with that. Yeah, I want to create this thing and I love this thing. I don't know how I feel about selling it. So that, I think that was a big hurdle to be like, oh man, people were willing to pay for what we just created. Whew, okay. So that's
amazing. And that was your first flip, right?
That
Technically.
that was our first rehab, first sale. We've never sold a property before. So full disclosure for everyone listening, we did not purchase as a flip. That was my first house. I purchased that as a single girl getting her first big job.
Out of grad school.
Out of grad school. It was just like a weird market where we moved to, and rentals were way more expensive than a mortgage, and the down prices are super cheap. So the down payment was, I spent like $5,000 to get that. You know, like people spend more on a car. So it was just like timing. So this was a little different in that we had lived in it, moved out of it, rented it, rehabbed it. So this house, I'm going to someday credit with our whole business. It got us into all of it.
It highlights such an amazing thing about being an entrepreneur and the idea of leveraging other people's money too, and being comfortable with taking that risk, because putting $5,000 down compared to what the actual sticker price was is a lot of risk at that age. And it's something that I think a lot of folks shy away from, but at the end of the day, you need to get comfortable with that. And you need to actually spend as little of your own money as possible and be able to leverage those resources and the systems that are in place to actually help you achieve those goals. And then it's a snowball. You start with one flip and then it's another, and then you have an empire.
Right? Taking notes for Airbnb.
Real estate. Yeah, I have so much to learn. As far as my business this week, you know, I've been exploring TikTok as kind of a social media marketing tool. And I really have been enjoying gaining momentum, not as much in terms of views as just feeling the flow of how to create content on that platform. And it's quite different to Instagram, different to YouTube, different to Facebook. They all have like a specific context and a way of creating content that works on those platforms that's not really going to translate over in different ways. I actually have Lauren to credit for getting me on TikTok, and I was looking back at my notes. You were telling me like, get on TikTok about a year and a half ago.
Really?
No joke. It's been forever. And I created my TikTok account at least a year ago, and I've only just in the past maybe month started posting. And I love a point you made in one of our masterminds was you had said posting on this is a lot easier than Instagram. And it does feel that way. Once you post, it's super short videos. They have all the tools in there. And then you don't even have to really make a caption. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I used to kill so much time thinking about beautiful captions. And I do enjoy the creativity of writing. The context is different. You just do like a one sentence and a couple hashtags and like your views blow up. So that's been really amazing. And just really thinking about how do I condense a YouTube video? What is a 5-second TikTok message that is relevant to my niche? And that's just been really fun, kind of putting myself out there in a new way. And then the other thing that I've really been working on this week is doubling down and investing in myself in a sense of professional development. Kind of hit me the other day that I'm the business as a mindset coach, as a motorcycle coach. My continual learning and improvement is going to make my business better. It's going to help my clients better. It's going to just improve my services and my reach. To think really critically about, okay, so where are my gaps? Where are my knowledge gaps? And maybe not even a gap, but where do I have room to expand? And doubling down in those investments. I've joined a couple different online coaching programs, but also reading a lot more books and thinking about how do I improve myself.
And it's like we're all lifelong learners.
Yeah.
We've all done school, done it again, and here we are still like purposely learning things. So we all know the value of that. And it's even more important when you are the service. That's like such a good point, Mel. I know in my W-2 life, it's very similar. Like we don't have a product, we just have a service. And that makes it even important that you are your absolute sharpest because you're the product.
Yeah, I think it's a long game play as well, as opposed to every day, you know, you get lost in making content, whatever, doing business stuff, but then you're like, whoa, long term, there needs to be growth here. I can't just churning the wheels every day, but how do you have that lifetime perspective that, like you said, the lifetime learning?
I'm excited to hear about all your like new adventures in your new apartment, Lauren. So much going on for all of us. Well, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, today we're going to be talking about how to decide what business to start, which is sometimes the biggest hurdle. Like we're going to talk a bit about analysis paralysis, I'm sure is going to come up in this episode. So if you're finding yourself in that loop, hopefully this is going to be really helpful for you. But we decided to feature this, like I said, because it's something we've all been through or struggled with ourselves. And we hope you're going to gain lots of insight. So let's dive in. We've gathered some thoughts and topics. We kind of brainstormed, okay, what were the questions we asked ourselves? What are the kind of themes around how we've picked or are picking?
Yeah, absolutely. And the first one really is, what is on your heart when we say, are you thinking about starting a business? What is that first thought thread that kind of you can hold on to and say, yes, and this is the subject. This is what I'm thinking of. This is my passion. This is my life. That thing often that you can't stop thinking about is a deeper message calling you to step into that version of yourself and really start to express that in the way that is best for you. And I really firmly believe that the best ideas are the ones that we can't get out of our head. And that was certainly the case for me when I started riding motorcycles. I immediately, as soon as I sat in the saddle and had my hands on the handlebars, like I knew it was going to be big for me, but I had all these mindset things. So I lost a lot of time being in my head about it. But I knew, like, it was pulling at my heart. Like, I knew it was going to be life-changing. And then you push it down. You say, no, that's silly. Like, oh, my gosh, you can't do that. No way. And it just keeps coming back and it'll, like, bubble up every couple of weeks or maybe more than that. For me, those ideas are ones that we need to hold on to. And then you need to say, okay, what can I do today that will get me closer to that version of myself that I want to be, or that version of a business that I want to create, or that way that I can help and serve other people, because those ideas are really coming from a deep place and they're there for a reason.
That quote that Mel said, I think we should repeat like 3 different times. I have it written down. You need to like copyright this quote, Mel. But the best ideas are the ones you can't get out of your head. And it's so true. Say that to yourself listening to this episode right now. Like, what can you not get out of your head? What do you come back to? What just gets you so excited that you want to keep doing it?
Yeah.
And that might be multiple things too. And I think that can scare people. We'll talk about narrowing
and that's something that, just listening to Mel talk about her example, I'm going off script now. So I was just thinking, you know, back in, a year and a half ago is when Mel and I first started doing the mastermind session. And a year and a half ago, I had no interest in starting a business. I didn't want anything to do with it. I had some different things in my past that just made me say, nope, I want nothing to do with this. And then Mel kept talking about like these different business ideas. And I kept watching her grow in it. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Wait, you can do what? And so like, I just kept learning through the mastermind of like all these cool things that you're doing. And then like the freedom that you have to just be creative and build the business how you want to build it. And so this question resonates with me because it talks about what's on your heart. And I am all over the place. As you guys have heard, I'm interested in candle making, and then fitness, and then travel, and now Airbnb. And like, how do you bring it all to one thing? Or do you just have multiple business ideas? But what I've been focusing on is that I really enjoy learning the whole process of starting a business. Yeah. So like, every week, though my topics keep changing, I've been actively researching. I love the research and development phase of playing around with Canva and trying to make different brands and marketing and playing with color schemes. And then what do I do to buy a website domain? And then how do I create a website? And so it's like all that research and looking at Google Analytics. So that's been really exciting to me. Although I don't have the hard, solid business idea down, I'm exploring and seeing what works best for the time frame that I'm in my life right now.
And in the meantime, like, we're learning so much from you because you are so good at researching. Like, you bring back these findings. It's like, how did you even figure that out? Where do I even start on that? So I think there's so much value in that too. And it's important for like to be careful for people to find the line between researching for nourishment and researching out of fear. Like, there's a big difference there. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, that fear gets you stuck in research mode. So it's like, if you start to feel yourself being like, okay, I'm going to take this next step. No, I'm going to research it 3 more times. That's probably when you know, okay, I just need to do something. And we've talked about that together. I remember there was one point where you were feeling a little stuck, Lauren. We said, okay, like, what's something you can do? And you just like went for it. You like just recorded a video, like just to punch through that wall. So it's like definitely finding that balance. But I think what we all have experienced is really trusting our own gut and intuition. What is pulling me, and like, what do I want to do at night? Like, I close my laptop for work, and what's the thing that I'm like, I'm still thinking about going for a ride. I'm still thinking about making some candles tonight. I'm still thinking about designing this living room. Like, whatever that thing is, I think it is like trusting, even if you feel like, I don't have the training for that. I don't have the skills for that. I've never done that. It's okay. It's calling to you. Like, you can learn.
Yeah, the daydreaming thing. Like, I used to, when I was in my corporate job, I would sit in my desk and look out the window on sunny days and just be daydreaming, be like, I need to be on my bike right now. What am I doing? This like, and that whole like subconscious, if you just kind of zoning out, thinking about something, and you just keep coming back to that, that's your heart's calling. And I want to amplify something you said, Lauren, about you just love the process of learning. And that is so important as an entrepreneur, as an early stage entrepreneur, because it's an exponential learning curve, and it feels like it never ends, and it doesn't end, which is beautiful. But also loving the process and embracing the process is something that it is so easy to lose track of. But because we don't always see the results straight away, or we want results that are like a 5 years worth of results in 6 months, and then you think, oh, I'm not getting the results, what's the point? But it's like, no, it's about the process. It's about learning your craft, exploring these options, and really just getting a feel for what's a good fit for you. And that's something that I've always loved about your attitude in life and in business. You're just like, what about this? This is amazing. This is amazing. They're like, it's a positive spin on everything, not like negative.
Yeah. And I think one other thing that really resonated for me on this topic was in thinking about learning and the things you're loving. I think it's also looking at them broadly. And I know something Lauren and I have both experienced. Like, for me, the thing that always calls me back is like creating and design and like beautifying. And at different times, I've explored doing that different ways. And for some of the other reasons we'll talk about today, they weren't the right fit for my life or for where I was trying to go. But it was just continuing to refine and continuing to research and learn and go, okay, no, but I know I love to create, and that way is not quite working. So let's try this direction.
I think the other big thing is the constant learning. It never ends. And it's something that I've heard so often of, oh, I'm too old to learn this, or I already went to school and I don't want to learn anymore, or whatnot. But being an entrepreneur is all about learning and keeping up with the markets and constantly educating yourself so that you can produce the best product or whatever it is that you're putting out to the world.
So one of the second ideas we kind of boiled down, kind of riffing off of this, is, as we talked about the things we were all feeling really drawn to, was also making sure there are things that you would do for too long. I know I made the comparison before. If I spend 10 hours designing versus 10 hours working in a corporate life, they have very different impacts on my mental state. I can get lost in doing the thing I love. And frankly, I would and have done it for free. I don't know that I would recommend doing it to the point I did. But kind of back to what we were saying about like hurdle can be, well, I haven't done that thing, so I shouldn't. that's not necessarily true. And maybe you don't feel confident enough yet to charge someone, or you're still molding your craft. But so I guess it's just asking that question of like, what would I do for free? What would I do for so many hours that it's crazy and I wouldn't complain about it and I would still love it? And that really resonated with me. The first business I started was a wedding planning business, wedding planning and design. And up until very recently, I was still kind of dabbling in that. And when I started it, I think I planned the first like 5 weddings for free. I'm so sorry to clients who are hearing that. But I was so early on and I didn't know what I was doing and I wasn't confident and I didn't have any templates and I didn't have a process. So the first couple that I went to, I was kind of like, hey, will you take a leap of faith on me? And I promise I'm going to do my absolute best. And I have already, to your point, Lauren, like I've learned a ton about this. So like Mel's point, I invested in a class. Yeah. I, in theory, know what I'm doing, but will you partner with me? Yeah. And they said yes. And I did it for free. And it was a ton of work and I learned a ton. It was so worth it.
Yeah, I love that. And it also brings up for me the fact that like when you're starting out, you have to stay humble because it can be easy to be like, oh, I came here to make money and be my own employee and or be my own boss and, you know, make it rain and stuff. But it's like everyone starts at the beginning and as a brand new entrepreneur, you're still learning and honing your craft. But to be able, Jessie, for you to kind of humble yourself and be like, I don't fully know what I'm doing. Like, let me develop now so then later you can see those increase in rates and like create amazing services. Yeah, I like this idea for a couple reasons about what would you do without complaint. And for me, this really speaks to finding your flow mode and finding something that you basically lose track of time when you do it. You know, for me, riding motorcycles is something that obviously you get in that flow state. You're just like, I could ride all day and I have ridden 12 plus hours nonstop just because I'm like in it. I love it. I don't want to stop. Like, I don't even want to stop for gas, but you have to. You know, on the flip side of that, being a mindset coach, I've always naturally fallen into the role of like fiercely supporting my friends. And I've, for as long as I remember, just being like, what do you want out of life? Like, tell me what you need from me. And I'm like here for it 100%. No questions. Like, actually, let's break it down, put a plan together. Not to that extent, but I had always just fallen into those roles and kind of been in mentoring positions in various workplaces and leadership positions I just fall into, but also having like the communication skills to sort of bring that to life. And, you know, being a motorcycle coach, like I would do that, no question, for free. I help my friends, no question, no matter what. That's kind of how that sort of manifests for me, but love the idea of doing it without complaint, you know, without time limit.
It seems like such a simple thing, but I know this like question really resonated with me when one of the two of you brought it up, because I think about my parents. I think for many of us, we can think about our parents or our grandparents who were like grinding, doing something they really didn't love, and they were doing it out of love for their families. But I think we're all human. That impacts our own mental state and what we come home with. So that's, I think, a big thing for me is whatever I'm doing, adding to my life and not taking away.
Yes.
So I think that's like really the crux of the question. It's not to say, hey, you should be working for free, or you should have no complaints ever. Things are hard, for sure, but it's more of like, I think the root of our question there really is this thing that you're doing gonna add or take away?
And I think kind of what you both have said, and I really resonate with it, is taking things that you just love doing that maybe you don't necessarily see there's a business idea there right away. So like, I love traveling. I love studying other cultures. I love learning why people are doing things, how they're doing things. But you hear those phrases and those questions. I'm like, well, what do you do business wise with that? Like, how do I take that? And I think it is something that it allows me to also say, okay, well, look at the jobs and volunteer experiences that I have done and what do I keep gravitating toward. Like, I love being on a team and I love innovating and creating, and I want to have something that allows me to have that freedom to do that so that I can do things that I love, traveling and exploring different cultures. So it's like, how do you combine all of that? And you might not know the right answer right away, but it's something that you can you keep coming back to it. It's something that you're just excited about. You can research for hours. You can talk to your friends with for hours. And you might not be making a business idea out of that particular thing, but that could guide your path.
Yeah, it really speaks to the internal drive of why you want to do something. It's not to get the results, but to actually love it for the sake of what it is, and like the process and the experience, because that's what will get you through times where you aren't seeing the results, or you do still feel like an imposter, but you're kind of coming back to why you love it and why you're there in the first place.
Lauren, I want to kind of highlight something you said there too about it might not be obvious immediately what the business is. You just know you love something and it's something you're passionate about or it's something you care about. And I think that is also a really key part of figuring out what business to start or how to start, is like iterating. So I can think of like, that's a journey I've been on where there's so many, I keep all of my business ideas and they're fun to go back and look at and be like, oh man, I really thought that was a winner. But you know, to your point, like I also love travel. And at one point I thought, okay, I have a hospitality background. I love traveling. What could I do? And I developed this idea that was like an app that was called, I called it Travel Like a Local, which if you think about it now kind of exists, but at the time Airbnb did not have experiences. Like I was almost thinking of it as like the Uber of local travel guides. Still might be a business out there. I don't know. But I think that is an important part. It's like exploring and just like getting yourself in the flow of like, if you aren't immediately drawn to something, like if you don't walk in with, I know exactly the business I want to start as, I've had this idea since I was 3, exploring your interests. And to your point, Lauren, thinking about like, okay, I love travel. What would I change? What are my pain points when I travel? Okay, I love cooking. Like, where do I struggle when I cook? What resource do I wish was out there? And just like practice coming up with ideas and drawing them out and outlining them. And eventually something will fit all the criteria.
And documenting it and writing it down, because then you can kind of look back. And you said at the beginning, Jessie, of that you're either learning out of fear or learning out of something.
I think nourishment.
Out of nourishment. But it's like you can always be a constant learner and never act. But if you're taking notes and constantly looking back to see the progress that you've made and those next steps, and having kind of a plan of like, okay, by this time I'm gonna have practice with the marketing side, or just practicing with templates and exploring that.
There's like so much value in play
with
your business.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, this is so good. And I'm going to riff a little bit further on this, but it really talks about finding that inner creative spirit. And you know, when you think about building a business, you know, initially I did economics in grad school, so I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a data analyst consultant, I'll build a business around that. And then it took like a lot of unpacking for me to be like, no, like that's not who I am. I'm not a spread, like I was, but that's not who I want to be anymore. But then to kind of dive deeper and say, well, maybe I can create a business that has nothing to do with who I've been or what my major was or what I've done to fit that box. But like, who do I want to be moving forward? And to your point, Lauren, finding that out and following these threads and documenting it and then going.
And you can start to, Mel, that's like a perfect segue into kind of one of the other things we talked about, which is like finding your natural skill set in these business ideas. And so that's a beautiful realization that you had there, that I'm really good at data and analytics and analyzing ideas and things, but that's not what I want the business to be. But then you can still build that in. That's still a skill you're using. You're looking at your social media numbers all the time. You're analyzing your next strategic move in your business. So you're using that skill set. And I think that is really important, is leaning into your strengths. You know, in larger organizations, you know, as an entrepreneur often, or really we're all solopreneurs. So eventually the goal is to maybe have more people or build something a little bit bigger. But in a bigger organization, I know one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten is to hire for your weaknesses. And I think the same thing is true, even if it's just you and your business. Like you have to know what you're good at and what you're going to need software for or you're going to need help for, because you can't be good at all of it.
Yeah, the natural skill sets thing is a big one, because it is far easier to start something and excel at something if you already are naturally adept at that and you've already, you know, have that natural innate ability to build on. It kind of serves as like the foundation of your business. And to give an example, in my realm as a mindset coach, you know, I've recently come to terms with the fact that like communication is a skill. I never really thought of it like that, because I always thought like data analysis or money management or all these other like more businessy type things. But being able to talk to people, relate to people, have empathy, and to communicate a message, very important in starting a business. And that was something that I've always naturally been good at, having fallen into those teaching roles and those mentoring roles. And the fact that, you know, in my personal life, my background, I was born in Japan, lived in America as a young child, lived in Australia, back in America. You know, I've been traveling the world for a very long time. So I have those cultural like subtleties that you can kind of tweak to communicate better with different people. So that's sort of how I've been trying to shift my natural skill sets to this business. But again, I never in a million years would have thought that like my business focuses on my communication skills and not my numbers skills and my analytical skills. It's very different.
And I think that's something that our society teaches, is having those hard skill sets, and not the softer skill sets, your communication, your empathy, being able to relate to people. Because at the end of the day, a business, you have to be able to communicate what your product is to be able to make any sales, to make any profit. So it really is such a big part that we kind of as a society say, it's important, but it's not as important as being a data analysis or something.
And I think they aren't necessarily obvious. Like to your point, Lauren, about like soft skills or skills. Like for me, I know what I'm really naturally good at is like casting a vision and like leading or convincing people to go in a direction. And that doesn't necessarily translate to all the other parts of a business. But to circle back to what we said earlier in the episode, like I had to learn business. But the idea generation, that vision, that piece is really natural to me. So I've like tried to lean into that and like learn the rest. Do your best, learn the rest.
Influence is huge though. And you are so gifted at that, Jessie.
And that's, I mean, kind of to what you said, like you never thought of like communication as a skill. That's not something I thought of as a skill set. Like I think often the thing we're naturally the most good at, we almost take for granted.
So, I was just thinking creative. I never thought I was a creative person until I hit about 30, 31, because I always thought creativity was in the form of art and drawing and painting. And creativity comes in so many different forms. And that's like an untapped potential that I have that I haven't explored until just recently. So it's like, wow, what can I do now? Like that I'm tapping into this. So
I remember the first time you told us that, just being like, Lauren, you're so creative. Like, what do you mean you didn't think you were creative? But it's true. Like we all have these barriers and like some things we take for granted, some things we've blocked out. So we have to explore a little bit. So kind of thinking once you get to your idea, right? You've figured out what you're good at, or you have an idea of what you're good at, you know what you love. One thing that was really important for me in the life of like narrowing our businesses has been designing a life that's going to fit, or a life that is the dream you're kind of trying to create. And I was listening to another podcast recently, and just so I cannot claim credit for this idea, but it really helped me narrow things down. And I realized I sat down, and actually this was your advice, Lauren. I was struggling with, do I continue with wedding planning? Do I lean into this house idea? And at one point I had really seriously considered diving full time into wedding planning. The business was going well. I was getting new clients. I have a shed full of wedding things. Like the infrastructure was there. And I just had this weird feeling in my gut about it. And I couldn't describe it. And I thought maybe it was just fear. And I kept telling myself, like, just get over it. Yeah, you're scared, move on. But I just like couldn't get away from it. And I finally came to the realization that I made a list of what I wanted in life. And it wasn't a list of jobs. It wasn't a list of skills. It was, I want flexibility. I want time with family. It was things like that. So really basically made a list of values and then took a look at the business and said, here's the gut feeling that I'm getting, right? Like it's checking the boxes of creativity and it's using lots of my skill sets. It is something I'm naturally good at, but I don't want to work weekends for the rest of my life. And that business for me was so directly tied to my output. Like I would like to be able to grow a business that at some point I can take a vacation and it's still making us money. And that business isn't that. It's you put out this many weekends, you made this much money. And that was really the trip factor that I just hadn't been able to identify. So something that I really want to share. So this is what I heard in another podcast that really was like, oh, whew, that hit home. And it was that they pointed out that in the United States, especially, we tend to leave family for last. Sometimes how we prioritize, sometimes it's literally the structure of our day. Like family gets the leftover, right? We barely see our kids or our husband or our spouse or our partner until dinner. And it's just like, boom, boom, boom. Here's the quick things. I'm already tired. You're already tired. You do your homework. We got to go to bed. Day's over. And that really struck a chord with me. So I think one thing I would encourage any entrepreneur or someone deciding what side hustle or what business to go with is think about the life you want to design. What are your priorities for your life and for you as a person? And does that business fit? And that'll help you narrow some of those ideas out.
And I think also like I'm the same way, as really thinking about the different values, and that's kind of where I've restructured my thought process, because I was very job oriented and I'm going to work all the time and serve the community. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, no, I like my weekends and my days off and times with family and friends and being able to do things. But one of the things that kind of keeps resonating with me right now is, if you don't know what the options are, is to look at different books, different resources, hear what people are doing to create those lifestyles. I've listened to so many different podcasts on like side hustles, because you don't have to go from zero to full-fledged entrepreneur. So I listened to a lot of like side hustle things. I listened to a girl who was making a steady income taking cat photos on Instagram. It was like all these different things that I didn't even dream of being possible. And yet people have made it work in their own way. And it was just hearing some of those things of like, oh, something that's already being done, I can do it, put my own spin on it, and create a business and lifestyle that I want for myself eventually. So I really encourage you to just look at different podcasts, side hustles, startups, and different stories, because that can drive a lot of inspiration of potential.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, this reminds me of a couple things at the very beginning of my journey. And Jessie, I love that you talk about you started with like a values list, because I don't know if I had a similar sort of pivot realization, but it wasn't that formalized, which I love. Just love that structure. But yeah, so, when I was thinking about starting this data consultant business, and that was truly when I was like, what is an LLC? What does it take? Can I work for myself? What does being self-employed mean? And then, is actually, I don't want to be in Excel for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, hustling my butt off at a computer in that sense. And then, dealing with clients and explaining data 24/7, but then leaning back into my natural skill set of, I love being with women. I love helping others achieve their goals. I like to communicate and teach and help and learn. And then putting that sort of together into a life that I'm like, any day for the rest of my life, I would love to help women achieve their goals. Like, how easy is that? Okay, what can I do about that? And then that energizes me, more importantly. Like, when I think of that, to your feeling about the gut, is like, when I think about that, I'm like, yes, butterflies, happiness, light feeling. When I think about data analysis, I'm like, ew, gross. Like, my body's like falling in on itself, because that just doesn't feel good for the life that I want. And then starting with side hustles, like what you're saying, Lauren, is yes, explore those little niches and those passions, and then start small and expand to fit into those 3 hours after work, or the 8, 12-hour days you want to pull on weekends, because that can really blossom into something more. And that's how you start to begin to create that life. And I love talking about the resources, because one that I loved, that I read when I started, was The Laptop Millionaire. So the idea, and there are a million books about it, of creating an online business so you can work around the world, you have that mobility, and you have really control of your time. And that was huge for me. I just really, really had tension with having someone telling me what to do and judging my performance and judging how I showed up, when I was like, no, I'm ultimately the judge of that. And like, the higher being is the judge for that. And creating a life where you want to do the things that you're doing every single day. And that is, to me, ultimately like the definition of being the creator of your life.
When you said there, Mel, like what really sparked you was like, I want to support women. Like, there it is. I think really several of the kind of topics or steps we've hit on for people today are finding your why.
Yes.
And I think we hear that all the time, right? What's your why? What's your why? What's your purpose? And I don't know about you gals, but that was an intimidating question to me. I was like, I don't know how to be a good person. Right. So I think it is helpful to, as you were saying that, I was like, oh man, we really have just kind of broken down. If you're feeling that same anxiety of like, I don't know what my why is, I think these are things that will help you find it. And ultimately, like, Mel, you took this journey and went, oh, well, here's the thing that's making me feel light and feel good and is fitting my life. Oh, that probably is my why. It's a big journey to take people on.
Yep. And to push through the learning process to get to that, because it isn't an overnight thing. You know, I agree with you, Jessie. If you YouTube anything about business, it's like, find your why. And it's like drilled into us. And it feels like a lot of pressure, and like it needs to be a good why. And like, is this why good enough? Is it going to keep me going? To have that journey and to keep pushing through the little barriers. And then you're like, oh, this is why I'm here. And you feel it differently. It's not an analytical mind thing of like, my why is what others will deem appropriate. But it's like, no, like I feel it in my body. Like, this is why I'm here. And this is what I have to give, and how I can package my gifts and my beauty and everything that I am into like a business that serves the world and creates happiness and joy for others.
So I think the last step we kind of want to hit on here is a little bit more down to the ground. So we just hit the, up in the clouds, like finding your why and your passion and feeling good. I think once you figure that out and you've iterated a bit, then the question becomes, what's the market for that? And will this provide the life I need? And Lauren, you said something great a few minutes ago that in going on this journey with the two of you has blown my mind. You just said that there is a woman making a living taking photos of cats and posting them on the internet. So I just want to say to everyone listening, there's a market for everything. You just got to find it. So I don't think this should be a stumbling block for anyone, but it is important to think through, who is the market? What's the potential here? And is it going to satisfy your earning goals? Yeah. Because ultimately, being an entrepreneur is not about eating rice and beans for the rest of your life. Right. That's not what we're wishing for ourselves or you. And so it is, we do need to have that little bit of analytical in it too, to say, okay, realistically, here's where I want this to take me. And I know one thing that can be helpful to look at is, what's my earning goal? And also, what's the trade-off? So maybe I make $100,000 in my corporate job. I do not, but let's throw that out there. I wish that for everyone. Let's all say we're making 6 figures in our 100-figure jobs. Let's just say that. And maybe you think in your first 3 to 5 years of business, you think you're probably only going to hit $50,000 a year, right? It's a lot less. And you don't know, it could end up being a lot more, but that's what your numbers are saying. I also want to encourage people to think about, okay, my income is going to be less, but it's going to give me exactly the life I want. Yes. What's the value of that? Exactly. And does that lower number still feed me, provide clothes, feed my kids, hit the needs? Okay, then that might be worth it.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think when you talk about, you think through your numbers, is it going to be enough to achieve your goals? And that reminds me, there's actually in the US IRS, who manages, the taxation and stuff, there is like a threshold. I think if it's over $600, it like counts as a business and you need to report the money. If it's less than 600, it like is technically a hobby. And it's such a good point, because without making money, without revenue, without cash flow, well, not necessarily cash flow, but without revenue, you don't have a business. And we are not here to hustle and strive and not see those results. I wish for abundance for everyone, like you said, Jess. Obviously, I truly believe that's what we're all here for. We have unique gifts to contribute to like unlock that abundance, but we need to think through the numbers, price our products, our services, not undervalue ourselves, and then really dive into who is your customer base, who is your ideal client, or who is that end user of your service. Where do you find them? Literally, where do they hang out? Do they like Instagram? Do they like TikTok? Physically, do they like this part of town? If it's like more of a local service. And especially for you, Jessie, with real estate, how are you going to find that ideal renter, that ideal customer? And those are all really good technical, kind of tactical questions to start thinking about what's your market going to be. And then that really can be a great guidepost to angle or brand your services, and then can really help light the way on where you go next in your business.
I think another thing is, as you're researching and figuring out who your market is and everything, just being very clear on, like we reiterated from the beginning, your values and your why, and just kind of figuring out, because you might plan to hit 6 figures and then realize, oh, maybe that market's going to be hard, but being open to change and open to different things. Because I've seen from both of you where you have both started in one business and then it's morphed into something else, or you start learning that, oh wait, I thought it was totally going to be this way and it's not exactly what I want, or maybe I narrowed in too much and now I want to reach a larger audience. So it's okay to make those changes as you go along, and you could still have that target of, I want to hit 6 figures, I'm going to get there, but be open to how you get there, because it might not be the exact path that you want, but I'm going to start throwing in this word, but you can manifest. So you can start manifesting that I want to make 6 figures. How am I going to get there? And you'll be surprised at how your mind starts creating and thinking of like, ooh, this is a unique way to try. Let's try it this way.
And Lauren, I know in the past when we talked about things like this, like you are so good at figuring out where to find people. Like Mel, when you said that, I was like quietly snapping to myself, but it's so true of figuring out. I think people also can get intimidated by looking at the data and figuring out what their market is. So don't let the word data scare you. First of all, that doesn't have to be complicated. Maybe you want to sell women's clothing. Okay, well, step 1, how many women are there in the country you want to be selling in? How many women are hanging out on which social media channel? Okay, now you're starting to find your market. So I think don't let it be too scary, but it really is just a matter of figuring out, is this thing I want to sell going to have enough people purchasing it? And like we've said, there's a market for everything. So if you follow Lauren's advice there, the answer is yes. You might just need to like pivot and twist and like go to maybe a little different place virtually or in real life, find them. So it is just like following the numbers. Like once you have your gut, your passion, your path, your why, then it's using the numbers to help you find the buyers.
And the numbers don't have to be scary, because I have been scared by the numbers of like, oh my gosh, what does this really mean? But if you do a quick Google search for Airbnb, for instance, how many people use Airbnb in this city and this state, and it could be as simple as that. And then there's always these pre-populated questions under that. So I just start clicking. I'm like, oh, and most of the users are doing 2-night stays. Oh, and look, now they're doing this. And so you can kind of just start extremely basic by asking a question, and then your answers will start falling.
And Jessie, earlier you mentioned the fact that if you're trying to have ideas about a business, or really you're in that ideation phase, to think about, in real estate, what are your pain points? When you travel, what do you get frustrated with? And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, we start businesses because we had a frustration somewhere in our lives that like we snapped and we're like, I've got to solve this problem. And then that can be a great way to find out who your market is, because it can often be who you were 5 years ago, or how you felt, or like that part of your life. And it certainly was for me, back when I was trying to ride motorcycles, I had all these limiting beliefs. So it's like, when I think about who's my market, I'm like, oh, who was I again? Like, what was I doing? What were my recurring thoughts? What was my life like? And I know that I'm not alone, because that's a common thing. So where would that person be now? How could I reach her now? And quite often it can be like marketing your message to who you were. And that is, there are billions of people in the world. I don't know exactly, but there's a market there.
Yeah, definitely like following the path. This has been a fantastic episode. We could talk about this, I think, for another hour. But your morning commute is probably ending, or your time on the treadmill, so we'll wrap it up here. But hopefully that really helps people. I think when I think about the things we just talked about, boy, would having that laid out have helped me so much.
Yeah.
So just to summarize, like really listen to that still small voice that's calling you to serve or create or to do. There's a reason that you're feeling that. You've got to really make sure you have the internal drive to do this business. Even if there isn't, to your point, like a very quick financial return, find something that you excel naturally at, and then design that business to fit your dream life and figure out how to find the customer so that it's going to make the money to support it. Lays out a beautiful roadmap today. Thank you so much for listening today. We had lots of wins that we shared at the beginning. We just want to remind you that we're going to be doing a weekly win segment. So if you're listening right now, you're getting started in your side hustle, your business, you're growing your side hustle or your business, we want to hear where you're at. And you heard today, our wins don't have to be huge. Like maybe you came up with a new idea, you researched something new, you're testing something out on social media. We want to celebrate with you and we want to hear what you're figuring out. So send us your weekly wins.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Imposter Women. You can visit the episode description to find all of the show notes from today's episode. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, or Stitcher. Subscribing will keep you from missing an episode, and it helps us grow Imposter Women. Be sure to tune in next week as we continue to help you chase your dreams unapologetically. See you on the next episode of Imposter Women.